All right, hi everybody. The question we want to ask and answer tonight is, what is the meaning of the red heifer, otherwise known in Hebrew as the Parah Adumah? Now, much has been written about it, but not so much is known about it and what its secrets really reveal. We're going to talk about that tonight, and also we're going to talk about what Shlomo meant when he said that the wisest man that ever lived did. He didn't understand, and we're going to try to shed some understanding on it. So how can we possibly shed understanding on something that Shlomo Melech said is beyond his intelligence, beyond his seichel? So this is workshop number 33. It's the night of the 18th of Adar, Tafshin Pei Hey. And let's just jump right into the topic. I think we're all familiar with the topic of the red heifer, that it's a special red heifer that has to be brought and burned completely. While it's burning, it has to happen. There has to be things thrown into the fire, and its ashes are used to mix with special water. And then that water mixed with the ashes is able to, when sprinkled upon somebody who is tameh or ritually impure from a dead corpse, and went through the previous series of ritual proceedings for the past 7 days, that person is able to become ritually pure, tahor. And then so it's a very, very special thing. We haven't obviously had this in operation since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash almost 2,000 years ago. And nevertheless, it will be reinstated in the future. So we need to learn about it. And also this coming Shabbos, right, is Shabbos Parah Adumah, and we'll be reading the parsha of the Parah Adumah in the Beit Knesset in our shuls this coming Shabbos. So Rashi says something very interesting about what the whole Parah Adumah is like. Let's read what he says. He says his comment on the pasuk, which we're going to read in a second, from Bamidbar chapter 19, verse 2. We'll read the pasuk in a minute. I really want to read Rashi's comment about the pasuk before we actually read the pasuk. So Rashi says to us that this whole inyan, this whole topic of the Parah Adumah, of the red heifer, he says that it's a mashal. It's like he's going to bring forward a parable to help us to understand a deeper concept of what this whole red heifer is all about. He says that there's a mashal, a parable, leven shifcha. This little boy, this boy is the son of the maidservant of the king, and they live in the palace of the king. He's a little boy, and he's not always like super careful with. He hasn't properly trained, like a diaper trained yet. And it says, Rashi says, "Shetinef palatin shomelach," and he soiled the palace of the king. He went poo, and made a mess on the floor, wherever it went, all over the palace of the king. So Amru, so they all said, Tavo imo, so let his mother come, ut kaneach hatzoa, and let her wipe up and clean up the excrement, the feces, the poo, we say. That's what he says it's like. Then he says, kach, thus, it's like this. Tavo, para, let this young cow, this female cow, let her come, utechaper al ha'egel, and let her be an atonement or atone for the sin of the egel, meaning when Klal Yisrael made this golden calf, as they were waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu to come down the mountain after 40 days. That's what this whole thing is about. Somehow this whole inyan of the red heifer, of the Parah Adumah, is directly related to Klal Yisrael being forgiven, being atoned for, somehow, through this red heifer and the ashes of the red heifer, and cleaning up the mess caused by this terrible sin of the golden calf. That's what Rashi tells us. Now let's actually read the pasuk in Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 19, and see exactly what it says there that triggered Rashi's comment. Zot chukat haTorah, and much is written about this phrase, which we're not going to get into here. But Zot chukat haTorah, this is the chok of the Torah. This is the statute of the Torah. This is we say the quintessential, perplexing law or statute of the Torah, which is really beyond our comprehension. Zot chukat haTorah, asher tzivah Hashem, that Hashem commanded lemor, saying the following: Daber, and he says this to Moshe. Daber el bnei Israel. So say over to the children of Israel, Vikhu elecha, they should take to you a Parah Adumah Tamima, asher ein bamum, asher lo ala aleh o, meaning three things. Number one, should take a Parah, which is a female calf, a female cow, Adumah Tamima, which is purely and wholly red. That's what we call it, a red heifer. Asher ein bamum, it has no blemish. A mum is the Hebrew word for blemish, no blemish. Asher lo ala aleh o, and upon the heifer, the red heifer, never was placed a yoke. So never labored or did any kind of work, whatever, for man. So it was like totally free. These three requirements are very important. Without those three requirements, you don't have a potential Parah Adumah. So what do they mean? What's the significance? And this is not really complicated, actually. Many Mefarshim understand these things. So that's why we're going to have to get back to the end, B'ezrat Hashem, and answer, well, if this is so simple to understand, why is it that Shlomo Melech couldn't have understood it? So we'll get there, but I don't want to focus so much on that question. I just want us to understand a little bit about what comes out of a closer look at the Parah Adumah herself. So in your notes, I wrote down there's the number 1, 2, and 3, because there's really 3 essential requirements that this Parah Adumah has to have. It has to be Adumah Tamima, purely red. It can't have a mum, a blemish of any type, and never did it ever have an awl or a yoke put upon it in order for it to do, plowing or pulling or whatever for man. So let's go through each of these 3 things and see what we can learn about these 3 topics. The first one is that it's supposed to be totally red. Now, think about this for a second. Before we read a couple of psukim, ask yourself a question. If you want to, Rashi just told us that this whole Indian is all about a mother of a child who made a mess in the king's palace, and obviously the child is Bnei Israel. The question is, who's the mother? That we don't quite know yet. That's the heifer. This is what we're trying to understand. Who is this mother that can clean up the mess? But if you want to clean up a mess, why should the heifer be red? Shouldn't it be white? I mean, if you want to clean up a mess, you should have a nice, good white rag and clean it up. So let's read about this and see if we can understand. First, we're going to read in Yeshayahu chapter 1, verse 18. It says the following: Im yihiyu chatayechem kashanim, if you'll have your sins. Now, this is Hashem talking through the prophet to Bnei Israel. He said, if your sins will be kashanim, like scarlet wood, like really red, kasheleg yalbino, they'll become like snow, they'll become whitened like snow. In yadimu katola, if they're like been made red, if your sins are so stained with redness, like a tola. A tola is a little worm that they would, it's not really a worm, but it was called a worm. It was really some kind of like a louse or something that would grow off of these certain trees here in Eretz Israel, certain oak trees. And they would pick these things off, and they could squeeze out of them a certain substance, and they would make this red dye. That's how they dyed the red wool. So it's kind of a repetitive idea. Scarlet, what does this red dye come from? It comes from these tola worms. Anyway, he says, if you are so stained with sin that all there is just red, and red is din, right? Red is the color of gevura. which means judgment, then what will happen eventually? Katsemer yihu, they become like wool. So whether they become like snow, whether they become like wool, it's the same idea that the redness and the stain of the sin will be turned into white, pure white wool, pure white snow. But that doesn't make any sense because the heifer, she's already red to start with. So how can a red thing be used to clean up something that's already red and stained? Doesn't seem, and then somehow turn that into white. How does that even work? It's not logical. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So obviously we have to look past the physicality and delve a little bit deeper into the spirituality of this to try to understand more what's happening. What is this redness that she has? That somehow, even though she's red, because she's the red heifer, somehow she's able to clean up and turn all the stain, all the blood stain of others, all the sin of Bnei Israel caused by the Chet HaEgel. By the way, we've been suffering from that sin ever since. We've still yet to be completely, not, I would say forgiven, but I would say that we have not yet ceased suffering from the consequences of that sin. So in a sense, we still need this red heifer today. So let's read this next statement from the second Baba Metzia on Daf Nun Chet, which is page 58. It says the following: Tanei Tana Kamed de Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So a Tana taught the following before Rav Nachman, the son of Yitzchak, said the following: Kol hamalbin penei chavero barabim. Anybody who causes the face of his friend to turn white in public, meaning he embarrassed him and he humiliated him to such an extent that literally he lost the color in his face. Ki'ilu shofech damin. It's as if he shed blood, as if he murdered the person. There's a lot about this in the Gemara and in halakhic sources and other sources. This is a very, very serious prohibition. Anybody who causes the blood literally to kind of leave the person's face, and for his for the most part, we kind of look reddish, right? I mean, we call ourselves white, even people who are dark, and we call them blacks. I mean, even there, they still have like a certain, not like, well, maybe some people are like really, really black, but most blacks still have a tinge of red in them because it comes from the color of the blood underneath our skin. So somebody who causes all of a sudden you to become so pale by embarrassment, that's a very severe thing. So what's happened now to this Parah Adumah? Let's focus now on this red heifer. Why is she red? She's so red, but yet she's able to clean up the mess of people who are red, i.e., who are stained with sin. Her redness can't be her own sin, because that wouldn't make any sense. It's not logical to think that somebody who's so filled with sin is going to be able to clean up the sin of others. Rather, what is her redness the result of? We see here from the statement is teaching in Baba Metzia. Her redness is the direct result of having her own blood shed over and over and over again by being humiliated and disgraced in public by others. Because it says here that somebody who humiliates somebody and insults them and causes them to be embarrassed or shamed in public, it's as if that person was shofek damin. It's as if they spilled that person's blood. That apply that idea to the red heifer. The red heifer is symbolizing an idea or person who is so humiliated in public all the time that literally they're just getting their blood spilled over and over and over again, and they're stained literally with their own blood, i.e., as a result of them being willing to be humiliated and embarrassed in public. Such a person, such an idea is an important ingredient in the ability for that red heifer and what the red heifer stands for, in order for that red heifer and what it stands for to be able to provide atonement for Bnei Israel. That's number one. Number one is the person that the red heifer symbolizes is somebody who is so red that they literally have no, quote, blood left in themselves. I mean, obviously, if it's a human being, they're walking around, they have blood. But from the point of view of so many times that person has been literally killed, I say literally, but it's literally according to this pasuk, because it's as if they shed blood, but it's not literally because they're still alive. But it is kind of literally, right? So it's literally and not literally. Hopefully you understand what I mean. Over and over and over and over again, till literally every part of the surface of that red heifer of that person is coated with their own blood. That's point number one. That's why the red heifer has to be Adumah Tamima, which is like wholly, completely red. And there's a discussion in the Gemara whether are you allowed to have like one hair that's not red or not even one hair. We won't get into the details. If you're interested, you can look this stuff up in the halakhic sources. But the point is completely red. Okay. That's number one. Number two, what does the pasuk say? It says, Asher ein bamum. There cannot be a mum. And a mum is a blemish. No blemish. So it has to be literally perfect in its appearance, in its form. What does that mean? What is a mum, really? I mean, what is a mum? I mean, spiritually speaking, what's the cause of having a mum? Well, we know what a mum is. I mean, a mum is some kind of a physical blemish. But what is it? What is at the root of a physical blemish in a body? So to that, let's turn to the next source, which is Tikkunei Zohar. Now, the Tikkunei Zohar is a set of, I think, 70 tikkunim, which are all derived from a deep analysis of the word Bereshit. And when people talk about the Zohar and they learn the Zohar, or the big tzaddikim learn the Zohar, yes, they mean all the parshas that are discussed throughout the Zohar, parshas of the Torah. But more than likely, they mean this. They mean the part of the Zohar which is called the Tikkunei Zohar, which is the most deep part and aspects of the Zohar. So we're going to just excise a little bit out of the larger discussion, which is deep and very, very difficult to not just to comprehend, but also to give over. But the part of it that's relevant to us is understandable on the simple level, and we can use it to explain the root of what is behind a blemish, what is behind a mum. So let's read this together. I'll read it slowly because we may not be that familiar with the Aramaic here in the Zohar. So it says the following: Kegavna da, like this. So again, it's this an extract. So there was a lengthier discussion that preceded this. And then the Zohar says, oh, by the way, that's like this. Okay, so we won't get into what that was, but this on its own stands. Nishmata ihi Knesset Yisrael. The soul is the Knesset Yisrael. Now, Knesset Yisrael is a term used to describe, what does it mean? What does it mean? It means the assembly of Yisrael. It's a collective body, hence the soul. There's one soul, which is the soul of Knesset Yisrael. It is the soul of Bnei Yisrael. One soul, like it says way back there in the Parsha of Matan Torah and the Parsha of Yitro, where they were all camped together, and Rashi says, Ki ish echad belev echad. They were like one man with one heart. They were one soul. That one soul is Knesset Yisrael. On a high spiritual level, that one soul is the assembly of all of Yisrael. And it's also the Shekhinah on a deeper level as well. But we won't get into all the inyanim related to it. Just realize that there is a soul, and the soul is a collective soul for all of Knesset Yisrael. Kad ihi shlema. When that soul is whole and complete and full, what does it mean that the soul is whole and complete and full? It's full the pikudim da'aseh. Pikudim da'aseh means the positive mitzvot. So when the soul, when Klal Yisrael is whole, meaning that it's doing all of the positive mitzvot in the Torah, and there are 248 of them, Itmar ba, it is then said about that soul, about Knesset Yisrael, when she's pure like that. We have a pasuk from Shir Shirim. It says, Kulach yafa ra'iti. All of you is beautiful, my beloved. Mum ein bach, and there's no mum, there's no blemish in you. And so the Zohar is telling us that when is it that Knesset Yisrael can be said that she has no mum? When she's doing and she's complete in all of the pekudim da'aseh and all of the positive mitzvot. That implies that when she's not doing all of the positive mitzvot, she therefore ends up with a what? With a mum, with a blemish. Let's continue on. We'll see this more explained in the next part. Ve'im nishmata ihi mittanfa bechovin. So if the soul is like soil, and we had this word in the very beginning, this is the exact same word that Rashi used in the very first statement that we talked about of the boy of the mother who soiled the king's palace. That's the same word here. One is Aramaic, one is Hebrew. But he say if the soul got filthy, got soiled, bechovin. What are chovin? Chovin are our sins. They are our averot. The things that we have now an obligation. We have a debt because we screwed up. So you have a demerit, not a merit. You have the opposite of a merit. You have a chov, and you have to pay that back somehow. So there's two things. One, if the soul got filthy through an avera, and he's not talking here, the Zohar is not talking here about not doing a positive mitzvah. Here it's talking about violating one of the negative mitzvah. For example, if it says don't murder somebody, that's a negative mitzvah, right? Don't do something. And then you went ahead, chas v'shalom, and you did it, you murdered somebody. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the committing of an act that's against a prohibition. And that can also stain the soul. It can make the soul filthy and dirty. That's one aspect. And then he goes on, oh, gara mina afilu pikuda chada. Or even if there's like weakened or reduced from it, one mitzvah. Those are the positive mitzvahs that we just were told about a minute ago. So the Tikkunei Zohar is telling us there's two kinds of problems that can take place that can cause the soul, i.e. the big soul of Knesset Israel, also individual souls of each and every one of us, to become soiled, to become stained, to become flawed. So let's read that again. Ve'im nishmata ihi mittanfa b'chovin. So if the soul got filthy through violating a negative prohibition, oh, gara mina afilu pekuda chada mi'inun pekudin, or it was weakened or it got reduced, and the shefa, the abundance that's supposed to flow down from Shemayim to all the body parts, to all of the avarim, all the limbs, the 248 limbs, which are supplied with spiritual nourishment from the 248 mitzvot, the positive mitzvot. And if one of those positive mitzvot is not coming down, then that limb is not nourished properly, right? So what is that? What happens? He says, what happens is, come on, the oak mu myrai masnisen. This is something that the Tanaim of the Mishnah explained. What did they explain? I forgot to put the source. This comes from Sota, and Masechet Sota, page 21. Avera mechaber mitzvah. A sin, a transgression, extinguishes a mitzvah. So each body part, each of the 244 body parts, and we're talking here spiritual body parts, is nourished by one of the 248 mitzvot, positive mitzvot. And if one of those positive mitzvot is now interrupted and blocked and pushed away because there's some avera, there's some transgression that took place instead, this is what he's saying, that the avera extinguishes the mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is what provided nourishment for that aver, for that limb. And now the avera pushes that away. Bahu atar, in that place, the sharia avera, that sin, that transgression is now resting on, meaning on the limb that is resting on. We talked about this before in the class about all of our sins being engraven into our bones. V'is talek, and as a result, the mitzvah, mina, the mitzvah that we were doing, or we should have done, gets departs. It's no longer there because it got pushed away by the avera. Hahu aver ihu pagum. That aver now becomes blemished. The ihu mum, and now that's a mum, the nishmata. That's a mum, a blemish in the soul. So we see from this passage that a blemish, a mum, is the direct result. First of all, it takes place in the soul. And sometimes soul blemishes, soul mumim, right? Sometimes they express themselves physically in our own physical body. Sometimes they don't all the time. Shem is merciful. But many times, many say most of the time, possibly, a blemish in the soul will have its physical effect in the goof. And that's why we always say, when we pray for somebody's refuah shlema, what do we always say? We say somebody would have a refuah shlema, complete healing, refuah to nefesh, refuah to goof. We want the soul, the nefesh, to be healed and also the goof. We don't just pray for the healing of the goof, of the body. Why? Because if it's just superficial, just the healing of the body by itself it's like a band-aid. If the underlying problem is still not solved, i.e. the problem in the nefesh, in the soul, then you didn't solve anything. So this is the source of a mum. Therefore, let's tie this back to the Parah Adumah. What does it tell us? She's not supposed to have any mum. Meaning what? In the soul of the Parah Adumah, whoever that represents, there's no blemish to the soul. In other words, there's no sin or transgression that took place because that person violated chas v'shalom, a negative prohibition, nor did they ever lack a positive mitzvah. So basically, the Parah Adumah represents an individual who is purely and wholly righteous without sin, i.e. without blemish at all. Neither did the person ever sin by violating a prohibition, nor did that person ever sin by lacking the doing of a positive mitzvah. And as a result, their soul is totally pure without a move. That's point number two.
Sure. The Parah Adumah is a female only?
Yes. It is physically a female animal.
So it can't be ever male.
As an animal, no. That's a whole separate topic, and that's going to take us into another direction. But if you're thinking, oh, so it has to be a female, therefore we can never think that it represents a physical human male, that's not the case. Okay, but because the idea is that she's the mother of the child who made a mess. So it's a symbolic mother, not a physical, like, let me back up. The Parah Adumah is a physical female. It is a female young cow. But that doesn't mean necessarily that who it stands for, who she stands for, is a human female. She could stand for an idea, even a human male who acts like a mother to Klal Yisrael. Okay? I think there was a comment there. Let me just see if I can't see. I'll read it later. Okay, number three. Number three says, Asher lo ala aleh there was no yoke. No yoke. Was never bent to a yoke, this particular young cow. So what does it mean that she never had a yoke put on her? So let's read the third one now, down the bottom of the page, which says, this is actually in Pirkei Avot. This is the Mishnah, obviously, a very famous Pirkei Avot. Most people are quite familiar with the Mishnahs in Pirkei Avot. What does it say? Rabbi Nuchunya ben Hakana Omer. So what did he say? He's the following. Kol hamakabel alav ol Torah. Anybody who accepts upon himself the yoke of Torah, and like we're talking 24/7 here, right? Ma'avirin mimenu ol malchut ve'ol derech eretz. They take away from him the burden, the yoke of two things, of government and derech eretz. Government generally means the imposition of taxes by the government. And derech eretz means, in this context, it can mean different things in different contexts. Here it means basically having to earn a living for oneself. And the opposite. Somebody who chucks away throws off or separates themselves from the yoke, the burden of only being engaged in Torah 24/7, notnim alav, they give to him and they put on him a yoke. Once again, these two yokim, these two yokes, the ol malchut, the ol derech eretz. So we see that the idea of an ol is not a physical ol. I mean, it is a physical ol. It is a physical yoke for the cow, but it's not a physical ol for the person that the cow represents. What does it represent? The fact that it says that there was never an ol. There always has to be some kind of an ol, some kind of a yoke upon everybody. This is what this teaches here in Pirkei Avot. So we cannot go back and read the pasuk in Bamidbar that talks about the red heifer and say it never had an ol. There, it never had an ol to labor. It never had it never had these ol of derech eretz. It never had an ol of malchut. If it's referring to a human, meaning this person only absorbed their entire life was absorbed in the learning of Torah. That's what it means. So that was its all. It didn't have the all of malchut. It didn't have the all of having to worry about derech eretz, having to provide for itself. It didn't care about any of that stuff. It just accepted upon itself the all malchut shemayim, and that was it. So again, we see these three ideas. Let's quickly review them. Number one, we see somebody who is so red by having so much bloodshed willingly, by being willingly embarrassed or humiliated in public all the time. Number two, we have the idea of no moon, meaning their soul is pure without anything lacking or damaged at the soul level, meaning all of the mitzvot, positive and negative, are guarded and protected and kept perfectly. And number three, we learn this idea about never having an ol, never being subjected to the government, never being subjected to working, having a job, and all these kind of mundane activities, but totally dedicating himself to Torah, and that's it. Doesn't care about anything else. Doesn't worry about anything else, and is not interested in anything else. That's three major aspects that we can quickly learn, and you don't need rocket science to figure that out. The question is, what about Shlomo? How come he didn't understand this? Again, we'll touch upon it at the end. Let's turn the page over now and read three more aspects that are related to the red heifer. Because after you actually shecht or slay the red heifer and do all that you're supposed to do with it, and you're supposed to put it into the fire and burn it, you're supposed to throw into the fire three things. Let's read it. The Kohen is supposed to take 8 eres, a cedar branch, the azo, which is hyssop. I think it's like similar to oregano. I'm not exactly sure what exactly hyssop is, or what this azo was back then. Ushni tolat, and red crimson wool that was dyed with this red dye from the tola worm that we mentioned before. Vehi shlik el toch sreifat apar, and take these 3 items and throw them into the burning along with the parah. So really we have a total of 6 kind of things. 3 we already talked about, and 3 we're going to talk about now. So 8 eras. What is a tree? What does the cedar tree represent? So first of all, before we answer that question, let's read Rashi on this, because Rashi tells us something very interesting about these 2 plants. One is that got to throw in a stick from an eres, which is a cedar. It's a big, massive, mighty tree. And then on the other hand, you're supposed to throw in an azo, which is like a little shrub. So one great plant and one little bitty insignificant plant. So Rashi says, the eres hu hagavoa mikol ha'ilonot. The eres, the cedar is taller than all the trees. The azov, and this little azov, this hyssop, whatever it is, namuch mikulam. It's the smallest, puniest little plant amongst all of the trees. So on one end you got the greatest, and then you have the smallest. So we'll tease those 2 aspects apart. So a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 92, verse 13 says the following: Tzadik katamar yifrach, ke'erez b'lebanon yiskeh. So we say this on Kabbalat Shabbat, right? We have a lot of people sing this song, right? Tzadik atama yefa ke'erez b'lebanon yiskeh. Right, so what does it say? First of all, it says that a tzaddik, a holy, righteous individual, is like a tamar, which is a date palm tree that flourishes, and also like the cedar of Lebanon. So we see that, therefore, the cedar, which is mentioned in the pasuk about the red heifer, is a tzaddik. So now we added the fourth component to our assembly of characteristics that the red heifer represents. The red heifer represents a tzaddik. Now, what is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is mentioned many places before. We probably touched upon this in our classes and certainly in our articles on our website, and it's all over the place in Kabbalistic sources, that's for sure, and in Hasidic sources. A tzaddik, by definition, is somebody who you might say, wait a minute, we already had somebody. This somebody is like completely pure, no sins. So isn't that a tzaddik? Well, yes and no. The term tzaddik or tzaddik has a specific connotation, and it means the following. I should have brought some sources for this, but I forgot. A tzaddik is somebody who is completely 100% shomer brit. That's what it means to be a tzaddik. Somebody who guards his bris, right? Who makes, and that also includes the eyes, shmirat inayim. Somebody who is very, very careful on that member of his body, and is very careful with the eyes, and therefore is also very careful with one's thoughts, all involving that same inyan. Such a person is called a tzaddik. Now, such a person may sin in other areas. Could be. Right? But if somebody is a tzaddik, that's what it means. So that's why this is another ingredient of this red heifer. We already see that the person is pure, has no womb, meaning they never did any avera, they never lacked anything at all with even the positive mitzvot. So what more do you need to tell me that the person is a tzaddik? Of course he's a tzaddik. No, tzaddik is even an extra inyan. They're going above and beyond to make sure they don't have no negative thoughts, they don't see anything forbidden, and they never touch, no blemish whatsoever, anything relating to their aver down there below, and never any drop or whatever comes out of it deliberately, except through tashmish that's done in kedusha. Such a person is called a tzaddik. So this is what it is. You put that in there as well. Mix that tzaddik aspect into the red heifer ashes as well. Number 5, the ezo. Now it's just opposite. Seems like we just talked about this great tzaddik. Now we talk about a little shrub. So what is this little shrub? The little shrub symbolizes what's called shiflut. Now shiflut, in its English sense, can be translated as lowliness. Shiflut is really the fundamental character trait that's opposite of arrogance. Now, arrogance we understand. Arrogance, we think we're great. It's like we think we're great. We don't answer to anybody. We expect the world to conform to our desires and our wishes, all the time. It's basically the saying, I will rule. I'm the ruler. That's arrogance. And arrogance sees oneself as the top of a whole pyramid of people. I'm the best. I'm the top, and everybody's below me. Shiflut, or lowliness, is just the opposite of arrogance. It sees the whole world above me. It sees me at the bottom of the pile, at the bottom of the barrel. It says, I don't rule at all. Hashem rules. And even other people can rule all the time over me at will. I'm nothing. I'm the worst of all. Now, this idea we've talked about before, it's a very important concept in Breslov Chassidut, that's for sure. Let's read a little bit about what Rabbi Nachman says in Likutei Moharan. This is a little excerpt from Torah 14 in C5. So just again, pulling a little section out of the larger picture, he says the following. Sheshaber ga'avato me'arba bechinot shiflut. Somebody has to break their arrogance in 4 levels. At 4 levels of shiflut. Whoa, that's like intense. Yeah, it is intense. Let's see what the 4 are. Number one, ki tzarich adam lahaktin et atzmo lifnei gdoli mimeno. Person has to make himself smaller, think that he's smaller, believe he's smaller, behave that he's smaller, not like physically smaller, but spiritually smaller and less significant than all those around him who are greater than he is. Now you might say, that's not so difficult. I mean, if you know that somebody is a great tzaddik, well, surely you're gonna bow your head a little bit there, and you're gonna approach the person with a certain amount of humility, shiflut. You're not gonna act arrogant around a well-renowned tzaddik or a great gadol hador. But what if you don't believe that so-and-so is a gadol hador? What if you don't believe that so-and-so is such a tzaddik, and you think they're such a terrible person? You see, not so pashut, is it? So it could be, in fact, this becomes a very important inyan, a very person stumbling block if people are not careful about this. The point is, people who are greater than you, be aware of that and learn to, I'm talking to myself too, right? Learn to lower oneself, will lower the esteem of oneself in one's own eyes toward a person greater. That's level one. Now it gets even harder. Level two, Lifnei bnei adam ke'erko. Now, also before people that are at his level, that are his equivalent, in other words, his peers. You have to look at your peers as if they're also greater than you are, and that you're lesser than them. You have to make yourself smaller in stature, smaller in significance than even your peers. You may say, well, why should I? They're my peers. I'm their equal. Then you're not really grasping the aspect of shiflut, even this level two aspect of shiflut. And if we can't even get to level two, that means we still have an aspect of arrogance, even with our peers. Even when you think, I don't need to, he's my peer, she's my peer. Why do I have to, submit myself or lower myself in their eyes? I'm their peer. That's arrogance. It is. Okay, third level, lifnei katani mimeno. And even people that are less than me. That's what it says. Even before really means the minors, even like 12-year-old kids, 11-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids, 5-year-old kids, or people that are just way less in your eyes than you are. Maybe they're not so smart as you think you are, right? Maybe they don't have as much money as you think you have. Maybe whatever the case may be, and you consider them to be katani, minors, little people. You have to learn to put yourself below even those people. Oh, now it's getting tough. Now this aspect of shiflut is not so pashut, is it? And the fourth level, relief, I mean, sometimes, get this, shehu ba'atzmo katan mi shebekatanim. Sometimes you yourself, me myself, is the lowest of all the lowest. Somebody's going to be down there. Maybe it's me. But tzarich lahaktin et atzmo keneged madrigat atzmo. You got to actually shrink yourself, or lower yourself, make yourself smaller than the level you're actually at. Vidameh be'enav shuhu lemata mi madregato. And you have to imagine that you're actually lower than the lowest of the lowest. So where does that put you? It puts you at the bottom of the pile. There's no lower than this. The absolute total level of this trait of shiflut, of being shafel, the lowest you can possibly be is to be at the bottom of the pile. You can't be any lower than the lower of everybody. Such is the Azov. That's the hyssop. The hyssop is the lowest of all the lowest. It's the most insignificant of all the insignificant plants. And all the other plants are great. The apple tree is greater, the pear tree is greater, the sycamore tree is greater, of course, the aris is greater. All the plants, all the trees are greater and more important and greater stature than this Azov. The Azov is the one with the lowest stature, and that's the quality of shiflut. So such a person literally has acquired those 4 levels of shiflut. That's the 5th characteristic of the Parah Adumah. And the last one is that you throw in the shni tolat, this thread that is stained with this red wool that comes from that worm we talked about before. The the Tola worm. What is that? What is that? Why do you throw it in? So for that, we'll finish here with the pasuk from again Tehillim chapter 22, verse 6. It says the following: David HaMelech says this about himself, and I think if I remember correctly, this is the Tehillim, right? That Esther was also said about herself. V'anochi tolat. So David HaMelech says about himself, "I'm a worm. I'm like this little red worm, this little red louse that people pull off trees and squeezes to get a little bit of the red dye out, so they can stain some clothes, make it look beautiful red. That's what I am. Below ish, I'm not even a man. I'm a worm. I'm a louse. I'm a maggot. I'm not even a person." That's how David HaMelech saw himself, by the way. You don't have to think about this. Parah Adumah, a disgrace of a person, the complete disgrace. So if you see somebody that everybody thinks is such a disgrace, what a disgraceful person, and yet the person is a great Talmid Chacham and exhibits all kinds of shiflut and is willing to be embarrassed all the time in public, you got to think about yourself. Maybe that's an aspect of this Parah Adumah. Because that's what David HaMelech was like. And the last bit of the pasuk says, "Uvizuyam." Vizuyam means he's despised by everybody. Everybody hates him. Just like Esav. Esav despised his birthright. So this is the same word, right? That everybody despises this person just like Esav despised his birthright. So we have these 6 aspects now. In summary, let's just wrap them up, and we'll just talk a few minutes about Shlomo. Number 1. It seems obvious to me, at least, that the Parah Adumah, as a physical animal and as its physical ashes, is symbolizing this shifcha, this female maidservant in the king's palace. Of course, the king is Hashem, and the child who makes a mess all over the floor is Bnei Israel in the chet of the ego. So who's left? There's only one person left in all of creation. And that's Moshe Rabbeinu himself. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, the soul, better yet, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, who, by the way, is the soul of Mashiach, because it says many times in the Zohar that Mashiach, Moshe is the Mashiach. So Moshe is the female. She's the mother. And that's what Moshe is. Moshe is the mother of Klal Yisrael. He takes care of her, just like a mother cleans up the mess. And such a soul is so amazing. We saw these 6 ingredients of Moshe historically. And of course, the same Moshe in the end of time will be Mashiach, will also exhibit these same 6 traits. What are they? Somebody who is willing and totally humiliated in public. Number 2, has no averot by violating negative transgressions, and never lacks the acting out and doing a positive mitzvah. Is not encumbered and was never encumbered by worldly pursuits, getting jobs, paying taxes to the government, having anything to do with that stuff. Only involved in the world of Torah. Number 4, as a complete and total tzaddik, meaning kedusha of one's brit, of one's eyes, shmiras einayim, and all that entails. Number 5, shiflut, lowly, sees himself as being below everybody. By the way, when somebody has the attribute of shiflut, what emerges from it? Humility. Humility comes from shiflut. Shiflut is a personal feeling about yourself and how you see yourself in relation to other people. And humility, or anava, being an anav, is because you have such shiflut, and because you see other people greater than you, therefore you are willing to be their servant. You are willing to go and do things for them, and that's Moshe Rabbeinu. So not only did he have shiflut, as we have an open passage that says he was the greatest anav the world has ever seen. How was it that he was able to be the greatest anav, the greatest humble person? Because he had exemplified shiflut beyond anybody ever before and ever again, except for Mashiach himself. Number 6 is a person who is disgraced and hated by everybody. Thus is the Parah Adumah, And it didn't really require, all you needed to do was basically just, type in a couple keywords and go look on, do some Googling, or, go to Safari and find stuff, or even a surface understanding of Torah would have brought you this. So how could it be that it's brought down by Chazal that Shlomo Melech says he was the greatest wise, the greatest wisdom of all, and he didn't understand the Parah Adumah? How do we understand that? So I'll suggest something to us, and this is just a suggestion. It's a bit of a side point, but how could it be that he didn't know this? And my answer would be he did know this. And Chazal has always known these things. So you can read many Mefarshim that bring out a lot of this stuff. Well, in other words, it's not some great chiddush of me, of mine. This is scattered all throughout the writing of our great sages. So surely Shlomo knew this. So what did he mean he didn't know it? He didn't understand it. I think on one level what he meant was he didn't understand how it works. How does it work? What's the mechanism behind it? Not just physically, mother goes and cleans up a mess. Okay, we can picture that. But on a spiritual level, how is it that this great person, Moshe Rabbeinu, how is it that, and better yet, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, how is it that that soul, who's ultimately Mashiach himself, how is it that that soul is able to do this? By having all these qualities, how does that enable him to clean up the mess once and for all of the Chet HaEgel, which is still with us today? We're still suffering. We still have the Zoma running through our bodies that came back to us with that sin of the building and worshiping the golden calf. So how does it work? That was beyond him. What was beyond him was not that he didn't understand these inyonim here. What was beyond him was he could never really fully grasp how it works. and I don't even, neither can I can tell you how it works. I cannot tell you how Moshe Rabbeinu, how Mashiach will actually accomplish this. All we know is that these are the ingredients. These are the attributes. These are the characteristics that the person needs to have in order to be able to do it. But how does the atonement take place physically? What are the mechanics of that? I call it the spiritual mechanics. How? That's beyond all of us. Another possible answer is that when he said he didn't understand it, he looked down into history and he realized the sins of Klal Yisrael would multiply. We're not stupid. We know that we've reached a very low level. And even the Zohar says that at the end time, not only will we have reached the 49th level of Tumah, which is where we were in Egypt before Moshe Rabbeinu brought us out, or Hashem brought us out. Because back there it says that if we had reached the 50th level of Tumah, we would have never been able to come out. So, but you know what the Zohar says? It says a real pella. It says at the end time, Klal Yisrael will have reached the 50th level of Tumah. If we reach the 50th level of Tumah, how do we come out? If we couldn't come out back then, how can we come out back now? That's a real kasha. So actually, the Zohar gives the answer. The answer is that back then, we didn't have Torah. It was before Matan Torah. Today we have Torah. And because we have Torah, even at the 50th level of Tumah, we can come up. We can come up. But even so, how does it work? How does it really work? With all of the Aveirot that we've committed over centuries and centuries and centuries, Chas v'chalil, it's true. I'm not saying anything insulting to any of us. How is it that a single person, this is what Shlomo Melech could not comprehend. How is it that a single person, no matter how much of a great chacham he is, how is he able to machaper, to atone for all of that? All of it, all the way back to the sin of Adam Arishon, all the way back to the sin of the Chet HaEgel. How is it even possible? That's what was beyond Shlomo HaMelech. And that's what's really beyond all of us. Nobody really understands how we can read it. We read it in sources. We can read it in many sources from Chazal that talk about, that there will eventually be such a great person who will be able to mechaper all the sins of Adam, of man and of Klal Yisrael all the way back to the sin of Adam Rishon. Like, how does that even work? We're not talking about Christianity here, where this person is like a God man, chas v'chalila, and so wow, so you just kind of wave that wand and it'll happen. No, we're talking about a human being. We're talking about somebody like Moshe Rabbeinu. How does that even happen? How can somebody be so great is able to do such a thing? So we don't know. We do not know. This is what's beyond us. In my opinion, that's the answer to that question of how Shlomo Melech was able to say he never was able to fully grasp it. So what we do understand about the red heifer is who the red heifer represents. In our day, the red heifer will represent Mashiach. And all of the work that Mashiach will do and has been doing, hopefully for many, many years, in order to be able to provide atonement and drag us up, sometimes even with kicking and screaming, from the 50th gate of Tumah. And all that is really literally in the merit of Rabbi Nachman. Because Rabbi Nachman looked down from 250 years ago, and he saw this generation. He saw our generation. He saw the last generation before Mashiach would reveal himself, and he realized what was needed. He realized what was needed, and he wrote down Torah for us all. Well, he wrote down, really, it was Rabbi Natan who wrote it all down. But that Torah is the Torah that will bring everybody up. And if you go, it doesn't take a lot of brains to see this in this country right now. You go to rock concerts in Tel Aviv, and you go all over the country, even in Times Square. I saw a video, Times Square, and everybody's singing songs that emanate directly from Breslov Hasidut. See, because this is the great Mila, this is the great level of Rabbi Nachman. And we've seen this many times before. There's a tzaddik above, and there's a tzaddik below, and the two work together. Eventually, those two tzaddikim, one is the sun and one is the moon, will share the same crown. That's the great mystery that goes all the way back to Bereshit chapter 1, that the moon said, oh, how can it be that the moon and the sun, these two great lights, can share the same crown? It doesn't seem like it makes sense. Right? We talked about this before. And it says, good point, you're going to go down. But eventually, you see, the light of the moon will be increased to such an extent, be like the light of the sun. And the light of the sun, even 70 times greater. Okay, so I think that pretty well wraps up this topic. We might maybe want to do a little bit more about this next time. Maybe we'll look at the famous chapter in the prophecy of Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 53 that talks about more of this Inyan and more of these great, amazing suffering that the Mashiach does, because I think it's also tied in with this. We'll see if that's kind of where we're led next week. But we'll stay online. We'll stay on the camera for a bit. If there wants to be a little bit of a discussion, we can certainly have that. But online, please subscribe, share this video if you found it useful. And in the meantime, have yourselves a really, really great week.